We'll call the meeting to order. This is a special meeting. It's August 5th. We'll note that all commissioners are present. We just have one item on the agenda, and that's to consider an independent disaster declaration. As most of you know, there was a conference call on the 4th with the emergency management people from the state, and we'll call on Mr. Kessel to report on that conference call.
Thank you, President Johnson, Commissioners. That conference call was held in the office of Brent Pringle, the Stark County Emergency Manager. Greg Wills, Lonnie Hoffer, Tino Martinez was all present on the other side of the conference call, along with Mr. Pringle, myself, and of course President Johnson. The whole discussion was related to whether or not the city of Dickinson can qualify for a independent federal declaration, and we reviewed the expenses that have been incurred through unreimbursed expenses through all the public agencies in the area. You should have a sheet in front of you that outlines those expenses, and this is the form that we reviewed at that time. A team came out, a pre-disaster assessment team came out and did an audit of the expenses that you see on this sheet. Rough Rider Electric makes up about $440,000 of the $1,030,000 in total estimated expenses. Southwest Water Authority is just under $43,000. Consolidated is at $25,000. The Park District at $47,800. Rural Fire Department $10,000. City of Dickinson just over $400,000. Stark County $2,300. DSU just under $2,000. National Guard about $50,000, and the Department of Transportation about $12,000. In total, that was $1,030,000. Hence why the discussion of an independent declaration. In order to qualify for that, you need to reach $74,000 of expenses in Stark County, and then the state needs to meet $1 million. So we felt like we had the numbers to justify an independent declaration. During that pre-disaster audit, it was determined that both Rough Rider Electric and Consolidated do not qualify as public organizations, even though they've requested 501c3 status. The IRS has not granted that status. Because they were not 501c3 at the time of the event, those expenses cannot be counted, and therefore we lose almost just over $450,000 of expenses we thought we had. If you look at your sheet, the line in italics below the orange, the heavy or bold orange line of $568,000 becomes our new total once you remove Rough Rider Electric and Consolidated from that total. Because the number is well below the $1 million threshold, that means that it would be highly unlikely that we would qualify for an independent federal declaration. What that means is we operate under the current declaration, and Category B funding is the only category that we will qualify for. There are categories A, B, C, D, E, F, and G in the FEMA systems. A is for debris removal, B is for protective measures, C is for buildings and roads, D is for water, E utilities, G is other, and I'm not remembering what F is for right off the top of my head. So the only category we'll receive funding for is emergency protective measures. What that means is clearing streets of debris so that it would not impede emergency vehicles from moving down our streets and avenues. It will pay for the Emergency Operations Center and the costs related to that, but little else. So I've highlighted on the handout the light green expenses for the city of Dickinson as the ones that we expect to receive reimbursement for. Now, just to clarify, That reimbursement under Category B, if we're eligible for $132,000, is reimbursed at a 75% federal rate, 22% state rate, and then 3% remains the responsibility of the city of Dickinson. We had several hundred volunteers throughout the cleanup process, and we can receive funds for those volunteer hours to use towards our local match. We estimate that we have about $40,000 in local funding through the use of those volunteers to cover our 3%. So it's unlikely that we'll have a direct expense to cover the 3%, but we will not be reimbursed, or don't expect to be reimbursed for the categories that are not in green. What this also means is, since PA, or public assistance, will not be sought, our IA, or individual assistance, remains protected. So the FEMA has distributed almost $130,000 in their IHP program. 63,000 of that is in housing assistance, and the SBA has approved loans, 18 loan approvals for just under $1 million. So all of the question was going to be, if we qualified for PA, what the ramifications would be under IA. And since we are no longer eligible for PA, all of those funds remain protected. So if there's any other questions, I'll be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Mr. Kessel. Questions or comments by commissioners?
Just for the information of the public, regardless of what we do tonight, regardless of seeking this other declaration, this will not affect reimbursement to individuals or businesses.
The only way that it would have been affected is if we actually sought and obtained a independent federal declaration. What that would have done is it would have made us requalify for individual assistance. In order to do that, you have to have 100 homes that are damaged to a major degree. I can't answer for you what that what major means, but it could have jeopardized the IA funds. But because we don't meet or get close to that independent, IA funds should be protected.
Thank you.
It would be our recommendation, Mr. Kessel's and mine, that we do not seek independent disaster declaration. I mean, they made it very clear on the conference call that, in their view, we did not qualify, so if we sought it, we would just likely be rejected. So,
And that, we would seek that from the state, and then the state, if they agree with us, would send that on to the federal government. And as President Johnson said, it's unlikely that we would get state recommendation.
Mr. President, so there is really no motion that needs to be made tonight or anything?
that's correct, Mr. Steiner. There's no, from our perspective, there's no action required. So, I mean, if you need more information regarding that teleconference, now's the time to ask those questions, or if there's comments you'd like to make regarding this issue, you should make them now. Otherwise, there's no other business, and when you're done with your questions and comments, we'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Frenzel.
We're actually looking at about $270,000 worth of expenses that aren't covered, that we won't get reimbursed. Is that?
I guess, yeah, that would be true now. Mr. Kessel can correct me if I'm wrong here, but, you know, he's carrying an estimated number of $133,000, $133,500 for landfill expenses. And as I understand it, that's the amount of fees we normally would have collected on the debris that went into the landfill. So, in other words, we used up that much of our landfill that we won't be able to collect fees on. So that really wasn't money out of our pocket. This is really a rough estimate, but at least after that meeting, we were thinking that in terms of true out-of-pocket cost to the city, cash costs, we're probably talking in the $100,000 range. You know, so give or take a little bit, you know, as all this gets tabulated up. So, that's, you know, really when you consider the event, what took place, it's not that bad.
No.
You know, for the city, so, it doesn't look like a very good thing for Rough Rider Electric. You know, I think they took a pretty good hit there, and whether or not they have any other avenues available to them, I don't know, but. So, any other questions or comments?
So, Mr. President, you're saying that the other companies listed on here have to try and find funding for themselves, or declare that we originally had on here we were trying to get for them? Okay.
If I may, President Johnson, Commissioners, all of the agencies that were listed under here would fall under the same federal declaration. They would all have to achieve the same goals of $1 million. Since we can't achieve that, nor could they, based on the numbers that have been provided to us. So all of the agencies that are listed are unlikely to receive any funding from FEMA other than for Category B reimbursement. And it might be difficult for the majority of them to qualify any or a few expenses under that category.
Other comments or questions? There are no more, then Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have the motion, the second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. The ayes have it. We're adjourned.